You can dance if you wanna. I don't actually know the rest of the words to that song, but it stuck in my head for some reason. So, in my attempts to exercise insanities, I thought I'd check out Anthroposophy, if that's how it's pronounced. Oh my god, it's hot and delicious. Ah. Whew. So, anyway, I don't actually know what this is yet. Y'all will be joining me on my discovery. Otto Frankel Lundberg was quoted as saying, "The one they encounter the word anthroposophy in the most varied relationships of cultural life without being able to form the right idea of what it means." Okay, that sentence is fucking with me. Real bad. An attempt at the clarification is being made here, and actually 3 aspects are to be understood by the word anthroposophy. The scientific method of research into the supersensible world founded by Rudolf Steiner, 1861 through 1925. 2, the results of this research. These are also known as spiritual science, and are the necessary complement to natural science. They are the science of supersensible constitution of man, of the spiritual beings in the nature and the cosmos. Was this translated from something? And they are also the extension of historical and other sciences. What is e.g.? Is that, for example, a scientific answer to the question, who was and is the Christ? 3. The application of the results gained through spiritual science in the practical life of the individual or of the community. For example, in education, medicine, curative education, pharmacy, agriculture, sociology, as well as the diverse branches of the arts. Otto Frankel Lundberg, What is Anthroposophy? Translation, told you, there we go, by Josef Wetzel. St. George Publication, Spring Valley, New York, 1979. Rudolf Steiner, Anthroposophy, cannot find its way through the world by ordinary agitation or propaganda, no matter how well meant. Agitation kills true anthroposophy. Anthroposophy must come forward because the spirit impels it to come forward. It must show forth its life because life cannot but reveal itself in existence, but it must never force its existence upon people, waiting always for those to come who want it. It must be far removed from all constraint, even the constraint of persuasion. Rudolf Steiner, The Life, Nature, and Cultivation of Anthroposophy. Rudolf Steiner Press. This nigga had his own press in London. I guess my English isn't British. Oh, my taste buds. Above all, one must know what the true standard and content of anthroposophy should be. It does not consist of a sum of opinions which must be entertained by anthroposophists. It ought never to be said amongst anthroposophists, we believe this, we reject that. Such agreement may arise naturally as the result of anthroposophical study, but it can never be put forward as an anthroposophical program. The right attitude can only be, anthroposophy is there. It has been acquired by persistent effort. I am here to represent it, so that what has thus been acquired may be made known in the world. It is still much too little felt in anthroposophical circles what a difference indeed as between day and night exists between these two standards. Rudolf Steiner, The Life, Nature, and Cultivation of Anthroposophy, Rudolf Steiner Press, books. Life, Nature, Cultivation of Anthroposophy, and okay. Now that's that, but this website apparently has a lot to offer. So, what else we got? That's that shit right there, anthroposophy. But then he has this other shit, epistemology. Well, since we're on the anthroposophical topic, let's go with the Anthroposophical Society. What's your dealio? Oh, hello. In New Zealand. No, man, I want to like. I want the book. Give me information. The General Anthroposophical Society is in no sense a secret society, but an entirely public organization without distinction of nationality, social standing, religion, scientific, or artistic conviction. Any person who considers the existence of such an institution as the Gothanium in Dornacht School for Spiritual Activity in Science and Art to be justified can become a member of the society. The Anthroposophical Society is averse to any kind of sectarian tendencies. Politics it does not consider to be amongst its tasks. Politics, comma, does it not? Of Rudolf Steiner. Okay, well, I guess I know what book I gotta find. The Life and Nature and Cultivation of Anthroposophy. Anthroposophy. Well, while we're still here, let's learn about some people who practice this shit. That's not the button I wanted to press. Get out of here. The people who do this shit. Anthroposophists. Followers of Rudolf Steiner's philosophy have gotten the name anthroposophists. The question of how exactly to define who is an anthroposophist is an interesting one. I wrote a short essay on the subject. Below is a listing of several prominent anthroposophists from the early years. The selection is haphazard and incomplete, and I will be adding to it in the future. Emil Molt, Karl Hoyer, Lorna Schorbert, Marie Steiner, Liv von Sievers. I don't know who the fuck these people are, but okay. You know these individuals, they are apparently anthroposophists. Anyway, we haven't even really learned what this stuff is yet. What's going on? What is this shit? Tell me about this guy. What's his dealio? You want a screenshot of him? I'll get out your way. Boom, there he is. Bam. The purpose of this site is to highlight the multifaceted genius of Rudolf Steiner, although apparently not in much detail. He made substantial contributions in numerous practical fields, in addition to being the most significant occultist to come forward in the last century. The complete edition of his published works numbers over 330 volumes with surprisingly little repetition, making him among the most prolific authors of all time, though it was with the help of a number of stenographers. The links on the right explore Rudolf Steiner's contributions in various areas. Here we go. Complete works. That's what I want! Biography, biodynamic, holy shit. That's not the oh no, man. I want to see the master list. I want to see all 333 or 330 of them bitches indexed. Oh, there it is. In English or German on the internet. Painstakingly compiled across an index, this searchable database allows you to find the English publishing history of any German volume. It also contains links to most of its text by Steiner available on the internet in English. I guess at this impasse we have to make an important distinction between the concepts of focusing on one's ethnos and understanding a universalist idea. Because surely the logical conclusion is that something universal must exist, even according to our modern understandings, is the word, of the composition of human genetics. We know that we're very similar. In fact, we're 55% similar to a banana. So it's not so much that, a thing being different expels it. It just separates it. You know what I'm saying? So in this respect, I guess you could still be any number of things and still also consider to yourself to be an anthroposophist. Anthroposophist. That sounds a little better. Anthroposophist. Oh my god, it's still hot. Well, let's which one should we check out? Any chats with us right now, or am I alone? I'm all alone. Check connection and running apps. Get the fuck out of here. I just restarted this shit. Yeah, see, there you go. Fucking excellent. Now you're excellent. Now you glitch out. You glitch out on me. Now we're excellent. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, I think biodynamic agriculture. That sounds cool. Science, extended medicine. I guess I should stick with something that I'm already at least decently familiar with. Or, because of what we came here for. Oh wait, and then those are the people who do it. Oh no. I want to read about the work. Here we go. Anthroposophy. Wait, is this where I just was? Are you fucking groid? Let's go check out the archive. Worldwide presence for a worldwide movement. Oh shit, it's a worldwide movement, you guys. With savers who will take your order in San Francisco, New York, Frankfurt, Singapore, and Sydney, the Rudolf Steiner Archive and e-library is truly a worldwide presence for the anthroposophical movement. Whether you're a seasoned follower of the philosophy of Rudolf Steiner or someone coming here for the first time, this site will challenge your thinking and allow you to experience the world from a different point of view. It's the same, only different. Oh, I see what you did there. Oh, start with the basics. See the top of the left-hand menu, and then move on to other topics that may pique your interest. There are 28 books, hundreds of articles and essays, and over 6,000 lectures that Rudolf Steiner gave to the world. You'll find some good things to get going with the items below. Meditate on these. Day of week exercises. Right examination, right deed. Ooh. Hold on. Okay. I think I see where he's going with this. Okay. I could be wrong. Adolf Arson's Happy Book of the Week. Yeah. Contentment becomes self-composure. That's accurate. Yeah. Lecture Foundations of Esotericism. That's what I want. Wait, is this nigga still alive? No. We saw the date. Here, okay, 1905. Foundations of Esotericism. From Jesus to Christ. I am not reading that. We are not going down that rabbit hole right now. Now that sounds interesting. Mystery of the human being, not the human was. The Rätsel des Geschichtenlichten uses cookies. Proper functioning of our site. We used to give you the best online experience of protecting your privacy. Alright, because my more important than my privacy, apparently. We're just going to have to agree. We value your privacy. Change your mind. Click the cooking settings. Wait, what is this? Maybe I just don't know what a cookie is. But are we... So I can agree and then turn it off? Well, what happens if I disagree? Will the site block me out? I don't know. Der Geisteswissenschaft. Ergebnissen der Geisteswissenschaft. The historical evolution of humanity and the science of spirit. I guess that would be Geisteswissenschaft. See, Geist, ghost, Weissen, which is, because it's two S's and not the double S, is, if I'm not mistaken, white. And I don't know what Schaft is. So, I guess that's where the lore of spirits being white comes from. No person with real inner sensitivity would find it any longer necessary to have to speak about a mystery when dealing with human soul life. Then he would have to speak about the presence of hunger when dealing with the life of the body. In the way it functions, the life process must be so regulated that it induces hunger. It is possible to disregard hunger by the use of certain drugs and to believe that we can get away from it for a time, but in the long run this cannot be done without injury to the body. Similarly, any attempt to conceal the fact that there is a mystery in human life is bound to lead to injury in the soul. Those who disregard the mystery of the human being, either because of their condition in life or a lack of interest, very easily fall prey to a kind of soul hunger, and to what happens as a result of this. A sort of atrophy in the life of the soul, an uncertainty and powerlessness, an inability to find one's way in the world. Although no really sensitive person would find it necessary to have to speak about a human mystery in general, he would probably find more reason to consider that the great questions of life take on a new character in each succeeding period of time. As our time is so short, it is not possible to do more than indicate this fact. We can see how the outer conditions of life change from epoch to epoch, how new needs, new questions arise about the way we live. This also happens within the soul, which in its search for a solution to the mystery of man, changes its own finer qualities from epoch to epoch in order to make it possible for man to find such a solution. In this age that has been with us for 3 or 4 centuries, and particularly in the 19th century and our own day, which has culminated in the controlling of the world by means of steam, electricity, modern economic and social conditions. In this age, there are also questions about the world in which the human being is placed that are of a different kind from those of earlier times. The science of Anthroposophy seeks to approach the solution of the mystery of man out of the needs of modern times. It is a mistake to regard the science of spirit or anthroposophy sounds better. They gotta put the umlaut over that shit. As a renewal of the views of the old mystics. Now we're getting somewhere. Those who level this sort of criticism from whatever viewpoint it happens to come usually construct their own picture of the science of spirit and then criticize this picture, which actually has very little to do with what the science of spirit really is. It is only a caricature of the science of spirit that is criticized. It is of course not possible within the framework of an evening's lecture to mention everything that would be necessary even to provide an outline of the science of spirit. Only a few further points can be added. Your English is getting good. Thanks, Todd. I do good. But your comment is totally me off there. Only a few further points can be added to what I have been saying about this for many years now, even in the city. It is particularly important to remember that the science of spirit does not take its origin from religion or mystical movements, although we should not conclude that it is necessarily opposed to those, as we shall see later. But it arises out of the line of the modern scientific outlook, out of a scientific approach to the world, connected with what is happening in the evolution of present-day natural science. I do not think that anyone who despises the modern scientific outlook can penetrate the mysteries of the world as is done in the science of spirit, even if it is not the result of science that matters so much as the method of approach in conscientiously applying one's thinking to the phenomenon of the world. The science of spirit must be well versed in the ways natural science investigates and thinks, and in the way in which it disciplines the inner life of the soul in the art of acquiring knowledge. The science of spirit must absorb this and reckon with it if it is to keep abreast of the time. It is just in connection with such an approach that the question arises, how is it at all possible for modern science and the outlook which results from it to arrive at a view of the mysteries of the human being that really satisfies us deep down? If we are really positive thinkers, we cannot permit ourselves an answer deprived from, yo, what you doing? deprived from preconceived opinions or from one form of belief or another, but only from the facts of present-day scientific development and its method of thought. And so you will allow me to start with the course of scientific thought and research in more recent times. This will be regarded very much from the viewpoint of an admirer of the enormous progress made by the scientific approach in the 19th century, a viewpoint which enables one to realize that the hopes placed in natural science, particularly in the 19th century, for a solution to the great mysteries of man, were absolutely honest and genuine. To take one aspect of this, let us look at the rise of the physical and chemical sciences. Along with the hopes and aspirations which came with it, we see how people steeped in the scientific outlook began to believe, around the middle of the 19th century, that the innermost being of man can be explained in terms of the physical body, just as the working of the forces and forms of nature can be explained in terms of the wonderfully advanced laws of physics and chemistry. The great progress made by physics and chemistry no doubt justified such hopes for a while, and this progress led to the formulation of particular ideas about the world of the smallest particles, atoms, and molecules, even if people think differently about such matters today. Nevertheless, what I have to say about the atom and the molecule holds good for the whole of scientific development. Excuse me. The idea was to investigate them and to explain how the substance and physical force worked in terms of the constitution of the material molecules and atoms, and of the forces of mutual relationships brought about by this constitution. It was thought that if it was possible to explain a process in terms of the smallest particles, it would not be long before the way would be found to understand even the most complicated processes, which was seen as a natural process, the process of human thinking and feeling. Now, let's examine where this approach with its great hopes has led. Anyone having studied the achievements of physics and chemistry during the past decades can only be filled with admiration for what has been achieved. I cannot go into details, but I will mention the view of a representative scientist who sought his views in physics and chemistry in investigating the nature of the smallest physical particle, the atom. Adolf Roland, who specialized in spectral analysis. He formulated his view on the basis of everything that is about the particles that can be imagined as effective in the material world, and how remarkable his views are, and how justified they are must be recognized by anyone who has some understanding of the subject. Adolf Roland says, according to everything that can be known, he's without fucking the quotation marks for some goddamn reason. According to everything that can be known today, an atom of iron must be imagined as being more complicated than a Steinway piano. What? That's an okay. I see where you're going with that, Roland. Now, this is a significant statement, coming from one so familiar with the methods of modern science. Years ago, it was believed that one could investigate the tiniest lifeless beings, or at least produce provisional hypotheses about them, in order to find out something about the world that constitutes the immediate surroundings of our ordinary consciousness. In fact, does one find out? The scientist, piano is made of much more than iron. Right? No, like it's comprised of more sorts of atoms. But the thing about the atom being more complex, I guess, is what he was going for, is perhaps a word that he was not privy to. I'd learned about the word simplex recently from another channel I watch. I really like it because it wraps up the idea. Binary is simplex. We're having a conversation because binary, but what is it? It's just ones and zeros, right? It's simple, but it's big. It's simplex. Similarly, an atom, like its electrons, it doesn't just go in one spot and go. The way we understand it with modern physics is it's basically probability fields. That's pretty fucking. That's not simple, man. All right, where was I? Now, this is a significant statement covering 100 years ago. It was really more good investigated time. It means pretty good. And what, in fact, does one find out? The scientist has to admit that having penetrated this smallest of worlds, he finds nothing that is any more explicable than a Steinway piano. So it becomes quite clear that however far we are able to go by this process of division into the very smallest particles, the world becomes no more explicable than it already is to our ordinary everyday consciousness. This is one of the ways of approach. With its great hopes, we see, as it were, these great hopes disappearing into the world of the smallest particles. I just turned those two sentences into one sentence, sorry. Oh my god, and then he starts a sentence with the word and. Nigger, what? Don't you read? God. Additionally, honest scientific progress will show more and more by penetrating into the smallest particles of space that we can add nothing towards answering the great human mystery to what can be known to our ordinary consciousness. In another sphere, there have been just as great hopes, and understandably so, in view of the condition of the times. Just think of the great hopes people had with the advent of the Darwinian theory, with its materialistic bias. People thought they could survey the whole range of living beings, of plants and animals, right up to man. It was thought possible to understand man through having seen how he arose out of the species below him, and in following the transformation of the different species from the simplest living being right up to man, it was thought possible to find material which would help solve the mystery of man. See, I disagree. I think we came from the top down. Call me a Luciferian. Once again, anyone initiated into the ways of modern research can only be filled with admiration for the wonderful work that has been done on this subject even to this day. It was thought that we would find the single egg cell, out of which man had evolved, in the appropriate simplest living being, and would then be able to explain the origin of man out of this egg cell, which would be similar to what would be discovered as the animal form in the world. Not bottom up. No, I think we came top down. And what does Jesus say? We're in it, not of it. You know, accepting the idea that the spirit is eternal, but the body is not, kind of implies that we came from the top down. Although I guess if you change your context to something saying that the body is somehow an extension of everything, like your finger is your hand, but it's not though. Your finger is your finger. You know, it's a fun topic. If you'd like to have a live stream about it, I would entertain that discussion. Mr. Good Questions over here messed me up. Where was I? Okay. Half joking, that was a good question. Once again, the path was taken to the smallest. This time the smallest living beings. And, starting a sentence with and, what has been found there? It is interesting to hear what a conscientious and important scientist of the 80s, Nageli, had to say. He expressed his view, which has become famous, in the following way. Exact research on the individual species of plants and animals shows that even the tiniest cells of each single species have the most varied differentiation. The egg cell of a hen is just as fully differentiated from that of a frog as a hen itself is different from a frog. In descending into the simplest living cells, by means of which it was hoped to explain the complications facing our normal consciousness, we do not arrive at anything simpler, as for instance when we study the iron atom, and in the end have to admit that it is just as complicated as a Steinway piano. Thus, we have to imagine that the difference between the individual egg cell is as great as is the difference between the various species we see in nature with our ordinary consciousness. My solution to this is a weird one. I basically, perspective is consistent, whether you like it or not. And so it really just has to do with the levels of magnitude that you're dealing with, which would then allow your perception to organize the energy accordingly. So I like to say, as you increase magnitude, you decrease complexity. implying that the simplest thing would be the biggest. So imagine a pyramid, and you chop it in sections. They're still squares, just one's bigger. And eventually you get to the top, and you get to really, really tiny squares. And eventually you go to the tippity top, and then you reach a point. Like I should do eventually. Nageli therefore proves by means of his own scientific conscientiousness that the approach of Darwinism with its materialistic bias is of no value. But there is another interesting fact. We could, of course, think that Nageli, the great botanist, was really a one-sided personality, and in any case, what he said was spoken of in the 80s, and that science has progressed and that his views are out of date. But we can also study the very latest developments on this subject, which have been well summed up by a most significant person, one of the most eminent pupils of Ernst Haeckel, Oskar Hertwig. In the last week or two there have been published, there were published, there have been, shit. In the last week or two, there has been published his summing up of what he has to offer as a result of his research on, as he calls his book, Das Werden der Organism, eine Widerlegung von Darwins Zufallstheorie. We are interested by the fact that one of the great pupils of Haeckel, the most radical exponent of materialistic Darwinism, has, in the course of his life, come to refute this materialistic Darwinism in the most thorough and complete way. By burping, excuse me. I myself often heard from Haeckel's own lips that Oskar Hertwig was the one from whom he expected the most, and whom he expected to be his successor. And now we find today that it is Oskar Hertwig who refutes what he had absorbed as scientific Darwinism from his teacher, Haeckel. And additionally, also, any fucking word that means and when you start the sentence, why is my autism kicking in so bad? Also, he does it thoroughly for his work, if I may use the expression, has a certain completeness. This is what I wanted to say to start with. I shall come back to the question later. I would only like to add that Oskar Hertwig makes use of everything that even the most recent research has brought to light in order to prove that what Nageli said was absolutely true, so that one can say that the present-day position of biological research shows that a study of the smallest living entities does not tell us any more than does the study of the various species that we can perceive quite normally. For these smallest living entities, the cells are, according to Nageli and Hertwig, just as different as are the species themselves. A study of them only teaches us that nothing can be discovered in this way that cannot also be discovered by our normal perception in looking at the ordinary world. Nor is it much different when, I can only mention this briefly, instead of looking at the very small, we look at the very large, the world of astronomy. For here also there have been the most wonderful progresses, I see what it did, in more recent times. For instance, in the study of the way of the heavenly bodies move. In the study of the way in which heavenly bodies move, which surprised everyone so much in 1859, and which has held such tremendous consequences in astronomy and especially in astrophysics. Also, what has been the result? A thing one hears frequently from those who are at home in this subject is, wherever we look in the world, whether we discover one or the other substance, this is not the main thing. For we find exactly the same substances with exactly the same forces in the universe in the relatively large as we find working here on the earth. So that when instead of looking into the very small, we examine the very large, we only find what we know from our ordinary experience of space and time in everyday life. It is just in deepening what can be achieved by natural science, and in particular in feeling deep admiration for what natural science has achieved, that the way for a modern science of spirit or Anthroposophy is prepared. But the latter is also well aware that however admirable these achievements of natural science are, however significant they may be for particular purposes, however necessary they may be for sound human progress, they can never penetrate the real mystery of man. This they themselves have proved until now. Until now. Dun, 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 dun. Until I get my fucking spirulina Jack black tea. Oh, that's so fucking good. The science of spirit, or Anthroposophy, therefore takes its cue from natural science and tries to go quite a different way, and this way is not connected with trying to explain what we experience with our normal consciousness by means of a study of the very small or the very large, nor with methods using microscopes, telescopes, or anything that can be attained by our senses or instruments which help them, nor by any scientific methods used in the sense world, nor by studying anything other than what we experience in our normal consciousness. But the science of spirit seeks to approach a solution to the mystery of man by a quite different kind of perception, as far as it is possible for human beings to do this. Well, I would try to work from the framework that we're infinite beings, so we'll see what your brain can do. What do you got? In giving an outline, tell you what, because I'm feeling frisky, I'm going to do this one in a different voice. In giving an outline of how we can imagine this other way of looking at the things that surround us and at the events that happen around us in the world, I will make use of a comparison which will help to make the matter clearer. In ordinary life, we are familiar with two states of consciousness. The state of our normal consciousness, which we have from the time we awaken in the morning to the time we go to sleep in the evening. This is our normal day consciousness. We are also familiar with the state of our so-called dream consciousness, in which pictures arise chaotically out of the depths of the organism that are not accessible to human consciousness, and these pictures appear to be completely without any form of order. FT, the fuck? It is our experience that makes us aware of the difference between this chaotic dream consciousness and our orderly day consciousness, which is encompassed by the real world. The science of spirit, or anthroposophy, shows us that that just as we awaken out of the chaotic dream consciousness into our ordinary day consciousness, there is also a further awakening out of our consciousness to, as I have called it in my book, Riddles of Man, a perceptive consciousness. What was I saying? What was I literally just saying, huh? Perception, my niggas. Alright. The science of spirit does not deal with a reversion into a world of dreams, visions, or hallucinations, but with something that can enter into human consciousness, in ordinary day consciousness, in the same way that this day consciousness replaces our dream consciousness when we awaken. The science of spirit, or anthroposophy, is therefore concerned with a perceptive consciousness, with a real awakening out of our ordinary day consciousness with a higher consciousness, if I may use such an expression. And its content is derived from the results of this perceptive higher consciousness. Just as the human being awakens from his dream world where pictures move chaotically to and fro into the world of the senses, so now as a scientist of spirit, he awakens from the normal day consciousness into a perceptive consciousness, where he becomes a part of a real spiritual world. Now, first of all, I must give an idea of what this perceptive consciousness is. It is not acquired by means of any particular fantastic arbitrary act or fantastic arbitrary decision, but it is acquired by a person working as a scientist of spirit, work which takes a long time, that is no less toilsome than work in the laboratory or observatory, which is pieced together out of the smallest fragments, perhaps even with only small results, but which are necessary for the progress of science as a whole. But everything that the scientist of spirit has to do is not done as in the laboratory or observatory with ordinary methods and applications, but is done with the only apparatus that is of any use to the science of spirit, the human soul. It consists of inner processes of the human soul, which, as we shall now see, have nothing to do with vague or chaotic mysticism, but which demand systematic and methodical work on the human soul. Methodological. How does one acquire the wish to pursue such spiritual work, such an inner development, such a higher self-training? It is possible to do so by taking our ordinary conscious life as a starting point, and gradually coming to a particular kind of conviction that becomes more compelling as one immerses one's mind in the modern scientific outlook. For several hundred years already there have been some personalities with this attitude of mind, and today this is increasingly the case. I cannot mention individual names now, don't dox anybody, but this inner experience, which gradually emerges under the influence of the scientific way of thinking, as a distinct and necessary inner outlook of attitude, will affect increasingly wider circles of people and will become a common conviction with all the consequences that such a conviction is bound to entail. There are two things that we are concerned with here. The first is that we have to acquire a certain view of the human ego, or what we call ourself, by means of true and intimate observation, carried out willingly and with discipline. We address this self, we express it in one word. When after a certain point in our childhood development we begin to use the word I, in our honest self-observation based on self-training, we ask, what is this ego really like? Where is it to be found in us? Is it possible to find it, or if we are honest and conscientious, do we not have to admit, as the great thinker Hume did, who did not arrive at his convictions arbitrarily, but by honest self-observation, that however much I look into myself, I find feelings, ideas, joy, and sorrow. I find what I have experienced in the world, but I do not find an ego anywhere? And how can I, in any case, as he quite rightly says, find this ego? If it could be found so easily, it would also have to be present when I sleep. But when I sleep, I know nothing about this ego. Can I assume that it is extinguished in the evening and revives again in the morning? Without actually being grasped by the mind, it must be present even when the mind is not working in sleep. This is absolutely clear. And all those who are familiar with present-day literature on this subject will increasingly find this clear and obvious, that this will become more and more the case. How are we to understand this? I would have to speak for hours if I were to go into detail to prove what I am saying now. I can only just mention the fact that the ego of which we are speaking is present in the same way in our day consciousness as it is in the deepest dreamless sleep. The ego always sleeps. It sleeps when we are asleep. It sleeps when we are awake, and we know only about a sleeping ego when we are awake, about what lives, even as far as our waking consciousness is concerned, in a hardly conscious sphere of our soul life. Anybody got thoughts on that so far? Well, what's he going for? Because one thing I found rather interesting was you look up the definition of asleep, and it's basically just says not awake. So it's like, basically I'm positing that you're always awake. You're just sometimes awake in the dream world. Because what is your ego, right? It's whatever data happens to be surrounding your perception. All right, so it's like a shell, and you're the ghost. That doesn't necessarily make it arbitrary, though, especially if you are the sort of person who has worked on your ego, especially over many years. Like, what's his face? Hume. Apparently, he thought long and hard about it. I bet his ego was very fine-tuned. Because as far as it being a collection of data, your computer's ego is basically its operating system and everything else, right? And you'll see, if you study computer science, that having everything properly organized and defragged, and you have antivirus software, all that good shit, makes for a much, much better user experience on the computer. Similarly, being a soul and having a well-cultivated ego is a lot less stressful than being a fucking NPC. As far as weight conscious concerns, hardly conscious sphere of our soul life. Where was I? It sleeps when we are asleep, sleeps when we are awake. We know only about a sleeping ego when we are awake, about what lives, even as far as our waking consciousness is concerned, and hardly conscious sphere of our soul life. Even when we are wide awake in our ordinary consciousness, the ego is still only present as it is when we sleep. The reason we cannot imagine anything like an ego in us is because the rest of our soul life is present and, like the black spot in our eyes, cannot see. The ego is made dark in our souls in a way, and can only be perceived as something we cannot imagine. The ego is always asleep, and there is no difference between the way the ego should be imagined in sleep and when we are awake. Because the ego isn't what is awake, you are what is awake. It is the same when we consider our minds, for if we train our self-observation properly, we realize that our mental images have exactly the same existence in our waking day life as they do in the night in the chaotic mental images of our dreams. In our minds, we dream, even when we are awake. These truths that our ego sleeps and that we dream in our minds and imagination, even when we are awake, these truths, it is true, are washed away by our active life in the day. But for anyone able to observe the human soul, they prove to be great and shattering truths which stand at the start of every spiritually scientific investigation. And if we were then to ask, I was just going to mix the two up. Do I have dyslexia? I don't know. I put the sexy in dyslexia, and I'm saying. To ask, that's an old meme, I'm sorry. To ask one's self-observation. This is all very well, but how do we actually distinguish our ordinary waking life of the day from our dream life and our sleeping life? What happens at the moment when we wake up? As I have said, I cannot go into details. You can find all the details necessary more completely what I am now saying in outline. In an outline, some sort of outline, in my book, Knowledge of Higher Worlds and Its Attainment. The question arises, just like the worlds, what happens when we wake up? If our ego really remains asleep and our ideas and images, even in waking life, are like dream pictures, then what is the difference between the waking and sleeping human being? How long we been on? I should wrap this up soon. I have one viewer. Thanks to you, whomever you are, you're a special sort of soul. Oh yeah, Trained self-observation provides the answer. It is solely the penetration of the will into the soul life which differentiates waking life from sleeping and dreaming. The fact that we are awake and do not dream is due solely to the will pouring into us. It is because of this that we do not have dream pictures rising up without any direction of will. That we unite ourselves to the outer world with our will, and with our will become a part of the outer world. It is what awakens the dream pictures to the substance of realness, that they are images of an outer world, that brings it about that after waking up we are able to incorporate ourselves into the world through our will. I got a bunch of shit going on. However paradoxical this may sound to many people today, it will have to... Yes, you are. You know why? Because you are here today. You are with me, Mr. Wayland. And that makes you very special. Does that make me special? Oh. However paradoxical this may sound, it will have to become a basic conviction to a future outlook, and will indeed become so, because it is bound to follow from a science based on true self-observation. It is the flashing of the will into our minds that gives us our real connection with the outer world, which we experience with our ordinary consciousness. It is this that provides us with real self-observation in our ordinary consciousness. But we cannot remain in this consciousness if we really wish to fathom the actual nature of the things that surround us and the connection of human beings with the world. There has to be a similar transformation in our soul life, in the ordinary soul life we have in the day, in relation to the transformation that happens in our sleeping and dreaming life when we wake up. And additionally, also, as well as, a transformation can come about by working arduously towards a change. Firstly, in the life of our minds, and secondly, in the life of will. And you see this? You see this little bar right here, right there? That is how far down the page we are. So that took an hour. I'm gonna stop. Tell you what, I will revisit this website when I fucking feel like it. Thanks very much to Todd. He's awesome. Apparently, he's cool enough to stick around for an hour. And anyone who watches this later, you missed it. You missed the fun. You could have had your comments on the screen. I'd have been reading them and whatever. 1488 Halo people, y'all have a good day. See you next time.